Welcome to the Dear Misfits. I'm Amy, and this is my less bearded friend.
I'm Isaiah. I'm less bearded because I finally decided to trim down some of my winter growth.
Quite a bit.
Yeah,
You
quite a bit.
halved it.
I
More than
probably
halved
took off like, I don't know, 3-4 inches.
Yeah. So we're going to do 2025. If you've watched a couple of us, or well, maybe just like one or two, because we just barely started to get some videos up for 2025 because people were wanting to see what we were explaining exercise-wise, and we wanted to be able to show that. And so we're going to be brave and do the video style. So this is, if you want to just hear it while you're driving, you can go to our website or the different podcast platforms and listen to it as a podcast. But if you are listening to the podcast and you want to see just see us talking and see some of what we're doing with our movements, then you can go and watch the video on our YouTube channel.
Yep, you can find us at Dear Misfits on YouTube, and you'll see us. Our pictures come right up.
Yeah. And make sure you subscribe to the channel because that helps us be able to do lives, which is what we really want to get to, which was the whole main reason we want to do videos, is because we want to be able to interact with you with your questions and things, because I know so many of you tune in and have good questions that you ask afterwards, and we want you to be able to, on some of the big topics, be able to interact live. So
because you have the question, it's guaranteed someone else has it too.
Yeah.
And so we want to be able to answer those for everyone listening.
Yep. So today we're going to talk back about vision. We've talked about vision in some different episodes in bits and pieces, and we're going to kind of jump into a little bit about why. I know for me, I'm super biased towards using vision into regulating a dysregulated nervous system, but also from certainly a balance standpoint, and just getting people feeling a little bit more grounded. And I know you like it too, and you're doing more and more with it as well. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So vision, just a quick summary about vision. Obviously, we think of vision like I'm looking at you, you're looking at me, I'm seeing an object. Vision is much more than that. It's if we're just going to briefly talk about how our brain takes input in from the environment, sensory input and so forth, to decide what it's going to do with it, whether we're going to move, whether we need to be protected, whether it's dark, so we got to walk more carefully, it's just how we live. So for those of us that have the ability to have vision, it's a humongous sensory input into our environment. And we want to be able to use it not only to see better, but also just to help take some control back of our nervous system. And if our body is feeling stressed, or if we're mentally feeling stressed,
we're physically feeling it too.
So yes, just in so many ways, we use vision in the clinic to help simmer down. So let's talk about a few ways, because there's a lot of different ways. And there's like more specificity with like using more advanced imaging and things to determine what part of our brains aren't working as well and all of that. But from a clinic standpoint, from our standpoint, not doing that kind of intense diagnostic work, because that's not our role. We're just going to talk about some of the generalities of how we use it and how we have been getting really, really good results. And it's not just certainly with individuals that have had strokes and concussions and some different kinds of brain injuries. It's definitely helpful, but that's not the only way that I use it. I use it heavily when I'm seeing patients with chronic pain. So that's kind of the lens we want you to.
We're even using it with athletes too, working on performance aspects.
Certainly athletes. Yeah, that's kind of another more common, I guess, mainstream understanding of how to use some vision training with athletes. Yeah, we definitely do that in our Agape Performance spot. But so let's just kind of talk about some strategies that you can implement at home. Again, like for the all intents and purposes of this episode, it's what you can use at home to kind of help regulate your nervous system because you're dealing with some pain.
Simmer down.
So couple things. We have 2 different sheets that we most often give out when we want to give homework for vision stuff. So one of the exercises we give a lot is eye clocks. And eye clocks are, if you look in front of you, like past you, maybe across the living room or wherever you're at, 10, 15 feet away from you, there's a really big clock. 12 is at the top, 6 is at the bottom, just like you'd look at a clock. It's just exploded big into the room. You're going to take your eye movements and you're going to do just your eyes. And honestly, if you can picture it in your head and you want to close your eyes because it's just your symptoms are a little bit fussy and you don't tolerate looking around that much, then you can just close your eyes. But what you're going to do is look at that clock and you're going to look up to 12, down to 6, 3 times. And how quick you go depends on how your body's doing with it. So when we do this kind of stuff, we want to just barely knock on. I always tell patients, I want you to provoke your symptoms a little bit, but I don't want you to barge through the door. And what that means is you might feel like a sensation of a little strain or a little bit of unsteadiness, or just like it's hard to do that angle. As long as you're doing that a little bit, that's actually a good sign. It means you probably need the work. But if you're going to blow through that and push past that, we start to lose some good effect and actually kind of maybe could go backwards. So eye clocks, full eye clock, let's say you tolerate it, is, and the way I show people is 12 to 6, 3 times, just your eyes, full range, as far up as you can and as far down as you can without tipping your head. And then you would work your way around the clock, 1 to 7, 3 times, 2 to 8, 3 times. And it's just your eye movements working their way around the clock. And you'll get attuned into like which of these diagonals is a little bit harder to control or be able to get there. Take note of that and then keep working around the clock. Once you get around the clock, if you're doing well, then do the same thing backwards and then you're done. Why would you use that tool? One, it's just a good, like, especially if you're somebody who spends a lot of time looking at a computer and fixed at a screen, even your phone, or reading a Kindle or watching TV or whatever, where you're always kind of straight in front of you, then getting your eyes to dart and do diagonals is for you. Like, you just need to do it because the way our system tells us we're safe is that we're able to scan the environment. And the way we orient our balance better is, again, like being able to do it, not just focused on one thing in front of us and try not to fall, but that we can be dexterous with that. And we can be looking over at birds. We can look for cars coming, pedestrians, just whatever, things on the floor in your living room when you're walking back into the kitchen, like those kind of things. You're using your eye movements quickly around, but in a way that's able to allow you to keep walking forward. So eye clocks are good in that way. Eye clocks are also very good in talking directly to the part of your nervous system that is allowing you to get more into a rest and digest side of your nervous system. And hopefully, if you've listened to some episodes, we talk about this a lot. And we kind of are just going to simply talk about the nervous system from a fight or flight side, which is a little bit more, or flee, freeze. There's more to that, and the rest and digest essentially side, which is the parasympathetic side. So sympathetic, parasympathetic. And so often when we're dealing with chronic pain, we're stuck in that sympathetic side. And this is an important lesson. So I want you to tune into this. We think that as we start to educate ourselves on some of these tools, that you turn down the sympathetic side. And actually, that's not what happens. Actually, what you need to do is use tools to turn up the parasympathetic side or the rest and digest side. So the eye movements are one of those tools where we kind of take your thinking brain, your diplomatic brain out of it, and just talk to your physiology and say, you're good. You're scanning your environment. You don't see any threats. And so my system's able to calm down a little bit. If you're in a situation where that feels like a bit much to go through those diagonals, then we super encourage you to start with just holds. And you might even just start with looking to the right and holding that until you feel a shiver or a yawn. Any of those things are like an indicator that you're moving more to parasympathetic. And if you're not sure because you're thinking too hard about trying to feel it, then just do it for 30 seconds or a minute and a half, and then go back to the middle, relax a second, and then look off to the left and try to hold that. Those holds allow you to get similar effects without being so provoking because of the movement back and forth.
And there's an aspect to doing these visual exercises, visual interventions, that you need to be having your eyes open. Some of these actually involve, like your brain, when you're doing the scanning, recognizing that, okay, this environment is safe. Well, if you're doing it with your eyes closed, then there is a lack of processing that occurs. There's a lack of actual visual input to see that you really are safe. And so some of these visual exercises, you definitely need to have your eyes open. And that's something that we always pass on and tell patients and things that they're going to do these, because patients will come back in and be like, I don't feel like I'm getting much out of it. I'm like, okay, tell me, how are you doing it? How's the setup? And then I'm like, okay, did you have your eyes open or closed? And a lot of times, if it's not getting much out of it, then they had their eyes closed during some of these exercises. And it's super important, super key to help with that, not just the movement part of the eye, but then the processing of what you're actually seeing too.
Again, though, if it's provoking, start with your eyes closed.
Yes.
Because the actual movement itself can have good benefit without taking the sensory input from your environment, the light and so forth. So that's just generally speaking, that's eye clocks or eye holds, and that's a good way we do it. Obviously, we tend to want you to do it in an environment that's not a hyperactive environment, a really like stimulated environment, because already then your system's not going to really respond that well to your eye clocks because there's still a lot of stimulus going on. Let's say you're at a restaurant. Like, I have patients that have some highly sensate, like sensory input is just overstimulating pretty quickly, especially when they're in a dysregulated state or they're anxious or they have a lot of pain, but they want to go, it's somebody's birthday party in their family and they want to go eat. So if you're starting to get a sense that environment is getting overstimulating to you, there's tricks that I give people so nobody knows what you're doing, but you also could just go to the bathroom and sit in the stall and run through a set of eye clocks and some diaphragmatic breathing and try to work on things that way. Really quick, just to interject, if you don't want to do that or you can't do that, doing like just like having your hands like you're listening to a conversation and rubbing your ears. If I didn't have my headphones on, I just rubbing your ears. There's a place where your vagal nerve has some good communication to, that can be really quieting. Rubbing your hands together is called physiological quieting. Rubbing them on your pants, under the table, things like that are really good ways to, like stuff like this. Those are diaphragmatic breathing. Nobody knows you're doing it. Pelvic floor relaxation, which we're not even going to get into right now, is another way nobody knows you're doing it. Those are all strategies that you can use to quiet your nervous system down in a busy environment. But back to vision. So eye clocks, anything else you want to say about eye clocks specifically?
No, I mean, just having that set up, if you're having a hard time engaging it, or it is a bit provoking for your symptoms, then trying to find an environment when you first get into doing these where you can have it as quiet as possible, as dimly lit, so it's not so irritating of, like, if it's a strong light source and that you're not looking directly up into a light right above your head. But if you're having some of these symptoms, being symptomatic with just trying to do some of the visual aspect of it, finding a way to soften and have it as gentle of a place or as quieting of a experience as possible.
And there's the obvious reasons why that's good. That's easier to be calming, but essentially what it boils down to is all the time your body's using different systems to bring in sensory input that tells your brain, what do I need to do? Am I good? Am I safe? And then can I do what I want to choose to do? And so when you get into spaces that are quieter, good temperature, good smelling, comfortable, like the furniture you're sitting on is comfortable, all those things are good to your system and feel nice and feel coherent. Like, it tells your system, I'm on a soft couch, I'm in a nicely lit room, I feel warm enough, or not too hot or not too cold, smells good. All of those things say, okay, system, you can regulate, because it's very harmonious, and your system, all these different sensory systems that are bringing input into your brain, the more harmonious they are, the less conflict there is, and the more your system can say, okay, I'm good to try to calm down. And when your nervous system, again, like going back to this, like, just cannot emphasize this enough, the more regulated we can make your nervous system so that it will learn resiliency again to move in and out of that sympathetic, parasympathetic state, the more you can take on the stresses of the day. And some stresses isn't all bad, but sometimes we get a little overloaded. And so stress is, going outside, walking to your car and it's really cold. That's a stressor. Getting into a warm car, now you warmed up, you're building some resiliency of being able to accommodate to your environment. So stress is not bad. It's just, it needs to be appropriately placed on you. And you need to have a system that allows for stress and not to create a triggering experience because it's just used to too much. Your bucket can overflow. So iClocks in the sense of those directions. Again, like I wanted to start this with talking about the tools that we use to more so regulate the nervous system versus like retrain your vestibular or balance system, which we'll get into in a little bit. So let's keep going down the path of eye movements that are good for quieting. So a couple other things I give patients a lot when they need to quiet is palming. And so palming is when you take your palms, overlap, put them over your eyes, and people listening to the podcast, you can't see what we're doing. That's where it's good for you to go to the YouTube channel and see the video version of the podcast. But you put both your palms over your eyes and you don't let any light input in, and you just sit there for a minute and do some diaphragmatic breathing. So huge. It can be so huge. And I have kind of a rough and tumble guy that I am seeing right now who I think he was having a little bit of a hard time buying into what we were doing in the beginning, like rightfully so. It's just different. It's not what you expect when you go to physical therapy, but I just said, please trust what we're doing. We'll try to find tools that, works with you. And if it doesn't work, we'll find other tools. We got a lot of tools, but this is one that you can do really fast, like in your cubicle or in the bathroom or in your car or during break. Nobody needs to know what you're doing, to kind of just take input away by blocking that visual input and letting your system calm down. So that's palming, just very simple like that. You're not putting a lot of pressure. You're just removing input. The other thing is if you're somebody who is at I feel this tree behind me tickling my shoulder. I have to make some adjustments. I'm like, I hope it's the tree. It's not a bug or something. So if you're at a desk or doing something where you're focused on a screen a lot and it's just part of your job and you got to do it, or you're doing it because maybe you have some poor decision making with your screen time in general.
Oh, yep.
Or you make good decisions and you read a book on your Kindle. That's a screen. Doing something called panoramic view or softening is when you like, I'm looking at the camera to speak to you, those of you that are on the YouTube channel. So if I look past you into the horizon and I let my eyes relax and soften and don't try to see the horizon clearly, that's called softening. And just by looking past you, not like across the room, you got to go to a window and look beyond into a horizon, because you don't want it to be just like 10 feet away. You want it to be a little further. That is very relaxing to your system. How many of us love to, I just can imagine sitting on a deck of a cabin in the mountains overlooking water, how relaxing, or on a boat ride, looking off to the distance, or just you're the passenger in a car and you're on a long car ride and you're looking out the window kind of staring off. You're like regulating yourself. It feels good. It feels soothing typically. And so that's called panoramic view or softening. So that's another really good, easy tool. This other one I really like, but I want to have a flag of caution. If you're an individual who struggles with blood pressure or heart rate being too low, I would say probably don't do this one. But if you're on the other side of the spectrum or just in general feeling dysregulated, this one's really good. So this is oculomotor reflex. And what you're going to do is have your eyelids closed, and with the pads of your fingers, you're just going to place some gentle pressure over your eyelids, not digging into your eyes, but just a little bit of pressure. And you're going to stay there 30 seconds to, up to a few minutes. And what happens, research says there's a 20% effect on your blood pressure and heart rate, lowering. So if you have high blood pressure or in a fight or flight state where we usually have a little bit of high blood pressure, you can do that little pressure on your eyes and let that simmer back down. If you got some sensitive eye situations going on, obviously air of caution. I don't know you and I don't know your health circumstance. So you have to, all the suggestions we give you, you got to, use wisely for what you got going on. But generally speaking, that's a really effective tool. But again, if you individuals that have POTS or are kind of on the hypermobility spectrum and have some dysregulation in that way, just do that with caution, because it is pretty effective. So that's ocular motor reflex.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I would say from a just purely trying to quiet our system down, those are the go-tos that I give the most often from a vision standpoint. And I really, really like them. And so
Sunning.
Go ahead.
And sunning.
Yeah. So sunning's another one. Sunning would be you close your eyes, you look up at the sun, and you just kind of bask for a little bit. And then as your eyes are closed, so if I was looking up, the sun's over here, over in, atop of me, and I'm going to turn my head a little bit and because the light's still going to get through your eyelids. So it changes where it's hitting in your eyeball, and you're allowing it to just, bathe your eye. Really good. And also, we get really scared of sun because of skin cancer and stuff, but you need sun. You need vitamin D. You need it. You need that outside natural light to give you a lot of different physiological exchanges in your system from a cellular standpoint. So,
and a mental health standpoint, it's the winter when you are in the sun the least amount is the highest rate of depression. And so being in sunlight, natural light, actually helps improve mood and mental health states. And so that sunlight is super important. It's not like we're saying open your eyes and stare directly into the sun. And during a solar eclipse, definitely don't do that. But this is something where you would have the eyelids closed and sunlight still passes through. The fact that when you turn your head and you're like, how is that? Why do I need to turn my head? If you think about the back of your eye socket, if this is the socket of the eye, and if I'm holding my hand up and I am making almost like a palming, like I'm trying to catch a ball, the back is my palm. And those sensors actually it's a little rounded in the back. So if I have to turn to be able to get light to actually hit sensors on the sides, as I'm moving my head with my eyes closed, that way I can hit all of those sensors in the eye itself. That way it's not just hitting one spot in the center.
Yeah. And here's a other like hot topic these days where I feel like this might be maybe my second most asked questions in terms of tools that are good for you is red and infrared light.
Oh yeah.
You get some effects of this by the sun.
Yep.
Like there's historically, and we did a red light infrared podcast episode, not video, but just podcast episode, and I talked about this, but the history of this is there are like wards in hospitals and psychiatric floors that part of their care was putting their patients in front of windows or on a deck of the hospital or ward or whatever to get actual natural sunlight, and were having such astounding effects from it. That's where light therapy really took off. It was just they were finding when people got outside and got to a window, and were able to get some natural light, they were feeling better, and their health turned. And I mean, we get in this world where we're talking about all these tools and things that we need and this special equipment and this special app, and we forget that like there's some organic ways to get that done too that you don't need to purchase.
Which is always my favorite thing to offer. My first thing to offer are things that don't require purchasing.
And I think sometimes, many times, we like an easy fix.
Mm-hmm.
And so, or our system is overwhelmed because we hurt and we just can't get ourselves to do the things that we need to do to feel better. Like, I understand that happens too. But it really often, such a bulk of our health boils down to the things that we hear all the time but don't want to hear sometimes. Movement, rest, hydration, getting light, being socially engaged, eating appropriately to fuel our bodies, because eating should be not just out of pleasure, but if your first thought is, how can I feel my body better? If you just, and we get off on these rabbit holes, so it's just, we're here now. But if you think first, I'm going to eat not because I'm hungry and I want to feel good and emotionally fill myself up, like that's a thing to recognize, but I need to eat. What can I do that's going to give me the most fuel and energy? Potentially, it might entice you to make some better decisions, because it's hard these days, especially with the price of food. So we get it, but back to vision. So we have the eye clocks. Maybe you have to do holds. We have softening. We have palming. We have, what did we just talk about?
Sunning.
Oh my gosh, sunning. So those are all really good tools to try to calm the system down. And then I want to offer a couple of things that I really like to kind of create a little bit of that coherence between a couple systems. And we're going to start adding a little bit of our vestibular system in here, but we're going to do a couple eye things that if you're feeling kind of tight, stiff, you just also need some help regulating. These are a couple of things that are easy to do. One of them is the pencil push-up. And we do this, you may, if you like this and you start researching, they also use a Brock string to do this. But a pencil push-up would be that I'm going to have my thumb at the bridge of my nose or tip of my nose, depending on which nerve we're talking about. But just start the bridge of your nose. I'm seeing my thumbnail clearly with both of my eyes, and I'm going to move my thumb towards my eyes where I still can see both eyes can see one nail clearly, and I'm going to work my way out, and I'm going to kind of restore some synergy between my both of my eyes converging, diverging. For me, this is a really good one. For me, it feels like I actually get looser in my neck when I do this because my eyes are so different in their clarity, and like one eye works much harder than the other. And so when I do this particular thing, and I spend like 30 seconds doing it, I feel less tense in my temples and my neck. And so pencil push-up is a way that's a little less about just straight to the parasympathetic calming you down system, but more integrating systems a little bit. And then there's ones where we go back to the eye clock principle. And instead of having you have your nose fixed, your eyes are fixed and your head starts doing the diagonals. And people, when you're hurting a lot, when you've had a stroke, when you've had concussion, it's hard to coordinate that. And you'll find a diagonal that's particularly difficult. So again, like my eyes are going to be fixed and my head is going to turn up to 1, down to 7, up to 1, down to 7. And I do 3 of those and I work my way around the clock. Another really easy, like you don't need to go anywhere, really good, easy tool to kind of start making yourself feel better and help your balance, though we really want you to also have to move your body. But for right now, for this episode, we're talking about eye movement. So that's a really good way to diversify your tools from home from a vision standpoint. And we give other ones, we play with stuff a little bit, and we give you a sheet that gives you options to play with different things at home. But when you don't have tools and you need it to be able to move with you or travel with you, I would say this is a list of things to start with. And one that's a little bit harder, particularly if you're like driving bothers you, is if you can sit on a rolly stool at home and not like pick your feet up and have somebody spin you, but walk yourself in a circle and you choose it, you're seated, you're in control, and you walk yourself in a circle a couple times sitting on a stool or a chair that spins. That's an exercise that you can do to start training your balance center and kind of help desensitize you to movement. When you're in something that's still, but you're moving in the environment, like in a car, that's a nice, easy one to implement at home. I feel like those are kind of my big hitter ones that I wanted to make sure that we talked about that you could get started with, but that you use vision not just because you want to see more clearly, but that you want to be able to feel better. You want to use that as a tool to talk to your physiology, to get your system regulated so that you can reduce pain, feel more balanced, less unstable, because sometimes people use vertigo is when you have intercrystal issues in your ear canals, and vertigo is not necessarily you just being unsteady. Being unsteady can be you don't challenge your balance anymore. Like you're not playing like you did as a kid, so you don't experience and get used to movement in all directions like you did when you were a kid, so we just do less. And so our balance isn't great. Unsteadiness can also just be from a dysregulated system. So eye movements are a tool to do that. Diaphragmatic breathing is a tool to do that. Getting out and moving in a safe way and restore some of that. And going on a trail and going for a wander. We haven't talked about that for a while.
We haven't.
And looking for birds and people and plants and flowers to get you changing your eye positions is a really good way to do that. So
we actually have a plant app that we use that you and I both have, that like you like take a picture of a plant and it like identifies it for you. That was so much fun. I went out for a hike for the first time I had the app. Went for a hike up in I think it was in Estes Park, right there in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. And I was on this hike and I was like, every other like plant out there, I was like, ooh, what's this? What's that? I mean, the app, I think it says something about like telling you how the health of the plant and like how much water, things like that. But it was just cooler, like, oh, let's see if it can identify this one. And so going for a wander and just looking at plants, things like that, wildlife, I love it.
And being present in nature.
Yes.
There's something called Schumann's resonance. It's kind of the frequency that they can measure in nature when you're not around cellular towers and light poles and Bluetooth phones in your pocket and all that. But when you're just out in true nature, there's an actual frequency that kind of your body, they'll use the word entrainment, which your body kind of takes on that natural frequency in your brain waves and helps soothe you. That's a thing called Schumann's resonance. So there is like actual application to the environment you're in, creating some better feeling. And a lot of people talk about grounding mats and some things like that. You can get grounding mats for your mattress or grounding mats that are just for your feet that you might put under your desk. And if you can do it bare feet, you can purchase a grounding mat and put it under your desk and put your feet on it and ground, but you also can go walk in the grass as long as you're not allergic to grass. And hypothetically, maybe you're allergic to grass and you didn't used to be because your system's feeling taxed and your system's starting to respond hypervigilantly to things that it didn't hyper respond to before. And maybe if you get yourself back into a regulated state and empty out your bucket of stressors a little bit, that maybe you can go back out and into those environmental things that were bothering you and tolerate it a lot better. Again, I digress.
You heard that right. If sometimes a later development allergy is related to an increase in stress beyond your body's just normal ability to handle. And so getting yourself back into regulation can help with some of those more later developed allergies or maybe stomach sensitivities, including dairy or gluten, as long as it's not something like celiac disease.
Mm-hmm. Blue light special. I like to call those blue light specials.
Blue light special.
Since we're on the topic, another thing, just in the world of like electromagnetic frequency and all of that implicates us, like when you go to sleep, do not sleep with your Bluetooth on your phone and your phone under your pillow touching you. Please don't. Please move it at least arm's length away. Turn off your Bluetooth. In an ideal world, you turn off your Wi-Fi. You would have your TV off as well. Some of you are really reliant on your TV to go to sleep. And remove electromagnetic frequency from your room. It has an impact on you. It does. And if you're somebody thinking that you want to get a grounding mat, it doesn't do any good if you still have all of this, I'm going to say, assault on our system. I mean, it is to some vein assault on our system, especially 5G. And again, we're not going to go down the rabbit hole of EMFs, but it does have an impact on your system. There is an actual measurable thing that happens to your system and your cells when you're around that stuff. And it's particularly like at your head, holding on to it all the time. Like, just don't. Talk on speaker with your phone. Don't hold it up to your head all the time. These little things when you're maybe your body tolerates it a little bit when your body's feeling pretty good. But if you have met the threshold of your bucket of stressors and it's starting to overflow, this is a thing you can take away. Just like you can start drinking some water and maybe take just like half of your pop away.
Ooh,
Wait, am I talking to me or you?
Well, I'd say that sounds
Me.
a little scary for some people.
I think I'm talking to me about that. So wrapping up, the whole point was talking about vision. We want you to know so many things so badly that we just are going to tend to, again, we started this podcast because we wanted to talk how we wanted to talk. And this is what I end up doing with patients all the time, depending on their conversation back to me.
It's just being organic.
Yeah, it's just being organic.
Blue light special after blue light special.
So we really appreciate you tuning in and seeing the video on YouTube. And if you're on the podcast, awesome. Go to our YouTube channel and hit subscribe because we want to be able to get to some lives, and we'll figure this out and we'll refine it, and we'll fix sound issues or light issues. If you're people watching this stuff and you're overstimulated, some of that stuff might bother you, we'll work on it. We'll do the best we can, but it's just me and him working on this because we don't have a crew behind us. And I can fully appreciate why a crew is so valuable after trying to do this video style.
So if you're looking to come help out for free, by all means, like, you're welcome. If you got some expertise in this, you are more than welcome to come give us a hand and help us out. Give us some tips and tricks. We'd love it.
Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode, the Dear Misfits podcast and video series.
Yeah.
We're working on the name, but something like that. And
we'll keep workshopping.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ta-ta for now.